Hello there, aspiring tennos, and I'm sorry about the hiatus. I did not mean to take such a long break, it just sort of kind of happened. Anyways, enough about that, there'll be a video dedicated to that. Now, today we're going to talk about Gara, and she's one of those Warframes that's just, well, let's just say she's a little bit extra balanced. And look, I like overpowered Warframes and weapons. I am a meta beast. I love frames like Mesa and Baruch, who are basically just one button adrenaline factories. But I actually don't like playing Gara because I think she's too strong. That's not an exaggeration. I don't normally play Gara. She's just a little bit too brain dead for me. Let's talk about why that is. And I'll talk about her defenses first. She has a true damage reduction of 99%. Alright. Her second ability, her Splinter Storm, gives her a 90% damage reduction with no drawback and additional effects. She can give this to her allies, her companions, and her teammates as well. And using this with the adaptation mod, which gives 90% damage reduction to damage you received recently, stacking from 10% up to 90, you're gonna have a 99% damage reduction against incoming damage. Then, using Arcane Guardian, which I am on this build, alongside with just her normal armor of 200, you have just around 80% additional damage reduction on top of all of that. So you're only gonna be taking 0.2% damage, and that isn't even all, because normally frames uses either shield gating or they have a lot of damage reduction or armor, preferably damage reduction. But Gara can very easily and naturally use shield gating. The clip you're seeing in the background, I wasn't using shield gating properly. I hadn't gotten brief respite in yet, and I was already feeling pretty much immortal for the half an hour that I played. On top of that, her passive gives her a free radial blind. Yes, that is correct, a blind that will prevent enemies from dealing any damage to you, while also allowing you to deal more damage to them because of the stealth multiplier. On top of that, we're using radiation to cause the enemies to attack one another instead of ourselves. And not to mention, her fourth ability, her wall, actually gives her invulnerability while casting it, while placing a wall around her that blocks out weapon fire that slows enemies inside of it before eventually stunning them. So, as you can tell, she just has so insanely many levels of defenses, which in of themselves individually are already insanely powerful, and that's why she's so strong. Now that's not all, because she's not just a tank, she's also, well, she's kind of a nuke. She doesn't really have the range to just kill an entire room. As a matter of fact, her main damage ability only has about 5 meters range. On this build it's 4.5, but inside of this radius, you will have infinitely scaling damage. All of her damage comes from her second ability, more or less, her Splinter Storm, and the synergy it has between her fourth ability and her first ability. But we're going to talk more about that in the build section in a second. I'll also mention that I'm using a primer here, and this time around I'm not using the Epithet, I'm using the Kuva New Core. The Kuva New Core allows you to apply a lot more status effects quite a lot faster, but in a smaller radius. Since Gara's damage is so limited in terms of range, I don't really care about spreading the status effects further. Just being able to apply more of them to the enemies immediately in front of me is better for this build. Also, if you don't have primed sure-footed on this build, then the Epithet will just cause you to stagger constantly. That is the main thing that I'd like to mention as well, is that this build is not complete. I still need stuff like primed sure-footed on this build. And finally, I'll say there is a little bit of a warning, I guess. Bringing this to Corpus might not end well for you. Now, this build absolutely can go into level cap with Corpus. However, Gara does suffer a little bit from nullifiers, because if she ever touches them, they will reset her damage back down to 300, which is essentially nothing. Now, let's go ahead and actually talk about the build. Alright, so before we actually talk about the build itself, we do need to talk about how Gara works, because I think there's a criminally large amount of you who don't understand. So when you cast your second ability, first off, you're gonna get 90% damage reduction, assuming that you have at least 130% strength. But also, this is very important, as you will see on top of my abilities and my ammunition down in the corner, it says 325 damage. That is how much damage I deal per second to enemies around me. Basically nothing. Now, if you'll see, when I cast my fourth ability, first up, it resets the cooldown on my second ability. But also when I shatter it with my first ability, and this must be from the outside, you will see that the damage I deal to enemies around me increases. And what's important is that this will not decay unless I let my second ability's duration run out completely. So as long as I keep casting my fourth ability and then shattering it, I'll be able to build up damage indefinitely with no cap at all. Now, I was originally gonna use her augment, where when you cast your third ability on enemies, they have a 50% chance to drop energy orbs, but I found that it simply wasn't necessary if I used Arcane Energize. Now, if you don't have access to Arcane Energize, you might want to use her augment, which I'll show you here in a second. But let's talk about the other aspects first. But first up, let's get rid of this. I don't actually use this when I play her. It is not necessary. It's just a saving grace. It's just a good weapon in case I for some reason drop my my damage combo, my counter, my stacks. Then I at least want to have something to fall back on. But you know, if this happens 2 or 3 hours into a run, it's probably just the end of the run. So be careful not to drop your combo. Now, first up we have, and I've shown you this build before, but I'll show it to you again. So this is the build that I'm running with, and basically we want to build radiation because it makes the enemies attack one another instead of you. That's your additional defensive layer. But offensively, we're using heat and corrosive. We don't care about the damage of this weapon at all. This is not meant to deal damage. It's just meant to apply status effects really fast, with its fast firing rate and its ability to spread to nearby enemies with a very high status chance. All right, we are building heat and corrosive because both of these help lower armor and thusly help us to get through the defensive layers of the enemies. Now, if we were against, let's say, Corpus, we might want to run magnetic instead. You also might be wondering why I am not running viral. Well, let me show you. So once again, we bring out the Panzerful Befiler, which in my opinion is just the best companion in the entire game. And it has this ability called Viral Quills here, where it will apply viral to nearby enemies. And I think it applies more viral than it says on this card, because I feel like everything is affected by viral all the time. Alright, moving on. That's also, actually, probably, I should mention as well. Here on the Panzerful Befiler, we do have Panzer Devolution, which means that your companion will never truly die, which is just really nice so that you don't have to think about, you know, maintaining your pet. And the rest of the mods are just filler. Those are the important ones for this build. Okay, so then we have the Ether Reaper. Now, I do want to say right away, yes, I do have a ribbon on this, but do hear me out. This allows me to scale up my damage twice as fast as Gara's first ability as an semi-exalted weapon, which means that it uses the mods on the melee weapon. Now, as you can see here, this is a pretty damn good ribbon for this stat stick, as stuff like crits doesn't affect the first ability at all. We just care about a lot of damage. We want elemental damage and we want base damage, and that's exactly what this thing has. It has it in spades. It's a slightly better primed pressure point, but then on top of that it's like 3 elemental mods on top of that, so it's very powerful for this. All right, also I paid 80 platinum for that ribbon. It was not expensive. If you're just willing to look around a bit on Warframe.market or Raven.market, or maybe even in trade chat, I guess you might be able to find a cheap ribbon. Okay, then let's go ahead and take a look at the star herself, Gara. So we're using brief respite here, or respite, I guess if you want to call it that, which converts 150% of our energy spent while overshields are inactive. So if we have overshields, then we won't generate any more shields. Fortunate, but that's just what it is. So as you'll see here, it costs us 41 energy to cast our 4th ability, our Massive Vitrify, and then our Shattering Last, the 1st ability, it costs 13. So we're gonna get somewhere around 90 shields every time we cast this combo, which isn't enough to bring us back up fully for our shield gating, but we don't really care all that much about that kind of stuff because, well, we're actually giving ourselves more shields on purpose. Now the reason why we're doing this is because the natural damage reduction we get from the 2nd ability, the 90%, and the adaptation actually means that our shields are pretty damn useful. And the only thing that can really last through them, especially for the first couple of hours, are like bombards. And so having any shield at all still means that you block that damage so that you don't take damage from your health. You can't get a one-shot by them. Not that you would anyways, because of all of the armor we then have on top of that. You don't even really have to worry about bleeds because you are protected with your pure damage reduction. Alright, so this is basically the build, right? So quite a bit of range. You need a lot of range because you'll see here, even with all this range, it's still only 4.4 meters. But that's just what it is. Our only defensive mods here are Vitality and Adaptation. And I tried running this without flow, but it didn't really work. You do need quite a lot energy pool. You don't ever want to find yourself in a position where you can't cast Mass Vitrify, because then you risk your Splinter Storm running out of duration, and that will of course reset your damage, which you don't want to happen. That's basically how you end your run. Yeah, you do need a good bit of efficiency, and sure, duration is nice, but I didn't find it to be that vital for the build. But you are welcome to replace this with prime continuity. This of course means that you won't have to cast your 4 as often, but you do want to cast it often and saturate immediately to build up your damage faster anyways. So I like being able to cast this combo more often by having a little bit more efficiency. And keep in mind, guys, that the way that efficiency works is that it capped out at 170, so 15% is still a lot even in this context. That's pretty much all there is to it. That's the build. I've already shown you the demo and you know just how capable it is. This is one of the more broken builds, and as you will see, even from just playing half an hour, and I wasn't even stacking all that hard, I've definitely gotten higher numbers, but at the half an hour mark I had already scaled my aura up to 6 million damage. So you can very easily be running around with 30-40 million damage aura around you, while stripping all of the defenses of the enemies with your 2nd ability. Now let me go ahead and show you here against these enemies. I feel like you need a demonstration. So we have some pretty damn powerful enemies over there. Oh yeah, I gotta remember to cast my 2nd ability first. I'm so used to it already being cast, because when you're in a mission you don't, it's kind of a set it and forget it ability, which is extremely nice. I do appreciate that a lot. Low maintenance abilities are my favorite. So let's just try and build it up to 100,000, right? That's again just to reset the duration, and then try and approach the enemies. So these are very strong enemies, so they won't exactly go down immediately with this low amount of scaling, but we apply a little bit of corrosive and a little bit of heat, and you're gonna see that, you know, all of a sudden they're just gonna fall over. These are Eximus Leech Heavy Gunner units, level 185. So these are nothing to scoff at, and you know, if you just keep resetting our duration and then, yeah, I don't know, maybe adding a little bit more damage as well, yeah, this is very powerful. Now if you are absolutely not willing to go out and invest in a ribbon, And I know you guys are rushing your Warframes for 50 platinum when you could just wait, so maybe you can spare 80 on a ribbon. But if you really don't want to do it, you can play it without a ribbon. But I do want to say that you're going to be cutting your damage in half, so I don't recommend it. Still very powerful though, regardless. Also, I will say that the one area where, you know, Gara doesn't necessarily shine, he's still very powerful just because he's going to be running around with that like 99.8% damage reduction at all times. But in like non-endless steel path missions specifically, she suffers a little bit. Now, I guess there's one more thing that I do want to show you, and it's that the way that her fourth ability interact with her first ability. We have frontline butcher here, which is not a particularly strong enemy. Let's make it like level... Oh wait, I can't because I need to remove these first. I have a butcher here. Let's just say it's like level 60 or something, right? Oh yeah, sorry. 20 enemies, level 60. Level 60. Let's simulate those. The way that the ability actually works when you shatter it from the inside is that it sends out the damage of your first ability in all directions. This means that you're going to be dealing a lot of damage to these enemies. And just your first ability in of itself deals a lot of damage. So the way you have to think about this is that while your second ability is active, when you are near an enemy within 4.4 meters, you're gonna cast every instance of your first ability that you have cast on your ultimate throughout this entire round, this entire mission. And that's why it's so powerful. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.